The alarms inside ADX Florence were already screaming when the guards saw it, something that was never supposed to happen in the most secure prison in the United States. A man who had once been called one of America's most dangerous criminals was standing in the center of the hallway, outside his cell, even though no one was supposed to leave their cell without being chained from wrists to ankles. The prisoner's name was Marcus Hale, a man so violent and unpredictable that he had been locked inside the Supermax for almost 10 years, with zero human contact. Yet tonight, he stood free. No chains, no handcuffs, no guards beside him. The hallway lights flickered red, the steel doors rattled, and the floor shook as lockdown systems slammed into place. But Marcus didn't move. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He just smiled. A slow, strange smile, as if he knew something terrible that no one else knew. Then, before any guard could reach him, every single light in the hallway went black. Darkness swallowed the prison. Someone screamed. And then, a heavy crash echoed from inside the black hallway, followed by a sound no one in ADX Florence had ever heard before. A whisper coming from Marcus himself. The guards froze. They had no idea what was happening in the country's most secure prison, or how a man like Marcus Hale had broken free inside a place built to stop monsters exactly like him. But they were about to find out. And the truth would lead all the way back to the real reason ADX Florence existed in the first place. End of intro cliffhanger. The story of ADX Florence began many years before this night, long before the lights went out and the alarms shook the walls. It began at a time when the United States was afraid of criminals who seemed too dangerous, too wild, too impossible to control. Back then, prisons were strong, but not strong enough. Breakouts happened. Guards were attacked. Some criminals kept running their gangs from behind bars. And the country needed something better, something stronger, something that could hold the worst criminals America had ever known. That was when the government chose a quiet piece of land in Florence, Colorado, far away from any big city, far away from crowds, far away from anything or anyone that could get hurt. They wanted a prison so secure that escape would be impossible, a place so strict that even the air inside it felt heavy. They didn't want just a prison. They wanted a final stop. A place where criminals didn't come to serve time. A place where criminals came to disappear. The planning started after several dangerous events across the country. One of the most famous was a breakout attempt made by a man named Derek Lane, a smart and ruthless criminal who had led a violent gang for years. He had already tried to escape 2 high-security prisons using tricks, bribery, and even fake injuries. He had attacked guards, broken cameras, and used his gang to smuggle tools into his cell. But his biggest escape attempt happened at a federal prison in Arizona. It was a hot afternoon when Derek faked a seizure, forcing a group of guards to rush to his aid. But the moment they opened the door, Derek struck. He hit one guard, grabbed another's keys, and nearly reached the outer gate before backup stopped him. The news went everywhere. Escape attempt by notorious gang leader raises questions about prison security. People were scared. Judges were worried. Even lawmakers in Washington felt unsafe. If criminals like Derek could almost break out of a high-security prison, what would stop someone even worse? Another major event that pushed the government to act was the case of Samuel Pierce, a mastermind bank robber who continued ordering crimes while locked up. Even from inside his cell, he controlled money, sent messages through visitors, and gave orders through other inmates. He used codes, hidden signals, and corrupt guards to send instructions back to his gang. One day, while Samuel was still behind bars, his gang robbed 3 banks in 1 week. When investigators traced the orders, they were shocked to learn they came from inside the prison. That was the moment the government said, enough. They needed a place where men like Derek Lane and Samuel Pierce wouldn't stand a chance. A place where human contact was limited, where communication was impossible, where movement was controlled down to the second. A place that didn't just hold criminals. A place that broke their power. When construction started on ADX Florence, everything was designed to prevent danger. The walls were thick. The doors were steel. The windows were tiny slits that showed only the sky. The cells were silent, the halls were empty, and every single room was watched from a control center at all times. When the prison finally opened, reporters called it a clean version of hell. Guards called it the last prison a man ever sees. And criminals across the country began whispering about it like it was some kind of legend. ADX Florence became the final stop for the worst criminals America had ever faced. Not just thieves or fighters, but gang leaders, bombers, kidnappers, and masterminds who used fear like a weapon. One of those criminals was Marcus Hale. Marcus wasn't famous for robbing banks or running gangs. His crimes were stranger and scarier. He had the kind of mind that made police nervous. He studied blueprints, security systems, camera blind spots, and even how guards walked when they were tired. Marcus had escaped from 2 state prisons by noticing tiny weaknesses that no one else saw. He wasn't the strongest criminal. He wasn't the loudest. But he was the smartest. His final escape, the one that got him sent to ADX Florence, was the most shocking. Marcus had managed to break out of a prison in Ohio using nothing but a broken floor tile, a stolen ID card, and a map he drew from memory after studying guard movements for months. He didn't dig tunnels. He didn't fight guards. He simply walked out disguised as a repair worker. It took federal agents almost 6 weeks to find him again. When they did, they didn't take him to a normal prison. They took him straight to ADX Florence. For 10 years, Marcus stayed silent inside his concrete cell. No talking. No visitors. No way to send messages. No way to plan anything. Guards called him the quiet one, but they never forgot the stories of what he had done before. Some guards said he was still planning. Others said he had given up. But no one knew the truth. One afternoon, a young guard named Officer Bradley began noticing strange things near Marcus's cell. The air felt colder. The lights flickered more often. And Marcus stared more than usual, not at the guards, not at his food tray, but at the wall. The same spot. Every day. Officer Bradley didn't say anything at first. He was new. He didn't want the others to laugh at him. But the strange feeling only grew. Then came the night the power went out. It started with a deep rumbling sound below the prison, not an earthquake, not an explosion, but something else. Something mechanical. Something old. The doors shook. The lights flickered. And then, the entire prison went dark for exactly 3 seconds. When the lights came back on, Marcus Hale was gone from his cell. And standing in the hallway. No key card. No guard. No chains. Officer Bradley stared at him, frozen with fear. Marcus looked back with calm, steady eyes, as if he had been waiting for this moment for years. But what no guard knew yet was that Marcus had discovered something during his 10 years inside ADX Florence. Something hidden, something forgotten, something buried deep inside the prison's iron bones. Something that explained the real reason ADX Florence had been built. Officer Bradley stepped forward slowly, trying not to shake. "Marcus, how did you get out?" he whispered. Marcus smiled again, and whispered back, "You built this place, because you were scared of us. But you never asked what we were scared of." The alarms started blaring again. The hallway lights went out again. A loud, metallic grinding sound echoed behind the walls. Something was waking up. Something that should have stayed buried. And before Officer Bradley could run, before backup arrived, before anyone understood what was happening, a door at the far end of the hallway began opening on its own, a door that hadn't been opened in more than 2 decades. Inside it was darkness, and Marcus Hale stepped toward it. That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment ADX Florence showed its real purpose. And that was the moment something terrible began to crawl out of the darkness. Officer Bradley could barely breathe as the heavy steel door at the end of the hallway slid open by itself, groaning like something ancient and tired. Marcus Hale walked toward it without fear, without hesitation, as if he had been waiting his entire life for this exact moment. Inside the doorway was nothing but darkness. A thick, heavy darkness that didn't look normal. It looked alive. The air pouring out of it felt colder than the rest of the prison, colder than anything Bradley had felt in Colorado nights. "Marcus, stop!" Bradley shouted, though his voice cracked from fear. Marcus didn't stop. He didn't even turn around. Instead, he whispered just loud enough for Bradley to hear over the blaring prison alarms. "This place was never built just for us. It was built to keep something else inside." Bradley stepped back, his heart racing so loud he could feel it in his fingertips. He didn't understand what Marcus meant. ADX Florence was supposed to be the strongest prison in America, the place where the nation locked away its worst monsters. So what did Marcus mean by something else? Before Bradley could ask, a blast of freezing air shot out from the dark doorway. It pushed Bradley against the wall and knocked his flashlight out of his hand. The hallway lights flickered again, and this time, they didn't come back on for almost 10 seconds. When they finally did, Marcus was gone. He had stepped completely into the darkness. Bradley stared at the open doorway. He knew he should run. He knew he should call for help. But something about the cold air reminded him of the strange things he'd felt around Marcus's cell for weeks. The flickering lights, the odd humming sounds, the way Marcus stared at the same piece of wall every day. And then Bradley remembered something else. A rumor he had heard on his first week at ADX Florence. A rumor the older guards told the new ones to scare them. A rumor about the lower level. According to the story, beneath the prison, deeper than the jail cells, deeper than the control rooms, was a sealed-off wing that had been built years before the prison opened. No one used it. No one talked about it. No one even admitted it existed. It was a place where the construction workers heard strange noises. A place where tools disappeared. A place where a man once went missing and was never found. The government ordered that entire level to be welded shut. But some guards whispered that the sealed doors still opened sometimes. Bradley never believed the rumor before. But the dark doorway in front of him looked exactly like the stories. And Marcus Hale had walked straight into it. A loud clattering sound broke Bradley's thoughts. He spun around, expecting a weapon or another inmate. But it was just Officer Daniels, an older guard with gray hair and tired eyes, running toward him with a flashlight. "Bradley, what happened here?" Daniels shouted over the alarms. Bradley pointed at the open doorway. His voice shook. "Marcus Hale." He got out. He went inside. Daniels aimed his flashlight at the open door, then froze. His face turned pale. His hand trembled. "No," Daniels whispered. "Not again. They sealed this place. They promised it was done." "Wait," Bradley said, stepping closer. "You know what this is?" Daniels didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed Bradley by the arm and pulled him backward. "Come on. We need to call the warden right now. That door was never supposed to open. Ever. But Marcus is the least of our problems now." Bradley felt his stomach twist. Daniels wasn't the kind of man who scared easily. He had worked at ADX Florence since the first year it opened. He had seen violent inmates, riots, and attacks. But whatever this was, it frightened him more than all of that. They ran down the hallway, boots echoing against the rattling steel floors, alarms still blaring overhead. As they turned the corner, Daniels finally spoke. "You ever hear about the original plans for this prison?" he asked. Bradley shook his head. "Well," Daniels said, "the public version is simple. ADX Florence was built to hold criminals who were too dangerous for anywhere else. But the private files, the ones only the warden sees, tell a different story." "What story?" Bradley asked. Daniels lowered his voice. "The story of the first prisoner. The one the government never admitted existed." Bradley frowned. "The first prisoner? Before ADX opened?" "Yes. Before any inmate arrived. Before any guard stepped inside. Before the cameras were installed. Before the walls were finished." Daniels took a deep breath. The government built ADX Florence because they needed a place to hide one man, someone so dangerous, so strange, that no prison in America could contain him. "Who?" Bradley whispered. Daniels stopped walking. He looked Bradley in the eyes. His name was Rowan Black. Bradley felt a chill even colder than the air from the dark doorway. He had heard that name before. Everyone who studied old criminal cases knew Rowan Black, a man who had vanished from public records 30 years ago. A man who had been tied to violent cults, strange rituals, disappearances, and crimes that were never solved. Some said he was a genius. Some said he was insane. Some said he was something worse. But the strangest part of his case was simple. No prison ever reported keeping him. No court ever reported sentencing him. He was simply erased. "But that can't be true," Bradley said. "Rowan Black disappeared long before ADX was built." Daniels shook his head. "No, he didn't disappear. They put him in the lower level, the one beneath us, long before the rest of this prison was built. ADX Florence wasn't made for Marcus Hale. It wasn't made for gang leaders or bombers. It was made for Rowan Black. Everyone else came later." Bradley felt dizzy. But why bury him down there? And why sealed doors? Why all this? Before he could finish, the lights flickered again. A deep metallic boom echoed from behind them, from the dark doorway. Daniels grabbed his radio and started shouting into it. "Control room. Activate full lockdown. Close all sublevel entrances. I repeat." Then the radio crackled, hissed, and went silent. Every radio down the hall went silent. The alarms flickered. The lights dimmed to a dark, bloody red. Something was happening inside the lower level. Something waking up. Daniels turned to Bradley. "We need to go. Now." They broke into a sprint, racing past empty hallways and locked cell doors. The prisoners inside were shouting, banging, calling for guards, but the noise from beneath the prison was louder. Deep, slow, heavy, like footsteps. Footsteps coming up from the lower level. Bradley's heart squeezed in his chest. Daniels, something's coming. I know. Daniels shouted. Get to the control room. They turned a corner and froze. At the far end of the hallway stood Marcus Hale. But Marcus wasn't smiling anymore. He wasn't calm. He was terrified. Marcus. Bradley shouted. What happened down there? Marcus didn't answer. His eyes were wide, shaking, unable to focus.